The whistle of the afternoon train echoed across the dusty plains of Colorado Territory as Wilhelmina Nelson clutched her worn carpetbag, heart pounding against her ribs like a wild Mustang. The year was 1875, and after 3 weeks of grueling travel from Boston, she had finally arrived in La Junta, Colorado, a place she had only seen described in the single letter from her soon-to-be husband, Isaac Lawson. A man whose face she had never seen, whose voice she had never heard, but to whom she had pledged her life in a desperate bid for survival after her father's death, had left her destitute. Wilhelmina Willa, to the few friends she'd left behind, smoothed down her faded blue traveling dress and adjusted her bonnet. The station was little more than a wooden platform with a small building attached, nothing like the grand terminals of Boston. Heat shimmered off the plains, and the harsh sunlight made her squint as she scanned the handful of people waiting for the train. "Miss Nelson." A deep voice called from her left. Turning, Willa found herself looking up at a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of the summer sky. His brown hair was slightly too long, curling beneath the brim of a well-worn Stetson. Unlike the dandies of Boston, he wore simple work clothes, a cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms, denim trousers, and scuffed boots. A leather vest completed his attire, and Willa couldn't help but notice the gun belt strapped to his waist. "Mr. Lawson?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man nodded, removing his hat in a gesture of respect. "Isaac Lawson, madam. Welcome to La Junta." Isaac studied the woman before him, surprised at what he saw. The advertisement had described Wilhelmina Nelson as a sturdy woman of good character, willing to work, but nothing had prepared him for the delicate beauty who stood before him now. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a simple bun, but a few wayward curls had escaped to frame a heart-shaped face. Her eyes, deep brown and uncertain, reminded him of a startled doe. "You're shorter than I expected," he said abruptly, then immediately regretted his words as her cheeks flushed. "I apologize, Miss Nelson. That was poorly spoken. Please let me take your bag." Willa relinquished her carpetbag, suddenly aware of how little she had brought with her to start this new life. "Is it far to your home, Mr. Lawson?" "About an hour's ride. I've got the wagon just over there." He gestured toward a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 horses at the edge of the station. "Are these all your belongings?" Willa nodded, embarrassment coloring her cheeks again. "Yes, sir. I'm afraid I had to sell most of my possessions to pay for my father's funeral expenses and the train ticket." Something flickered in Isaac's eyes. Was it disappointment? Pity? Willa couldn't tell, but she squared her shoulders, determined not to appear as desperate as she felt. "Well then," Isaac said, placing her bag in the back of the wagon, "let's get you home before dark. Coyotes come out at night, and the trail can get tricky if you don't know it." He offered his hand to help her onto the wooden seat of the wagon. His palm was calloused but warm, his grip firm yet gentle. As Willa settled beside him, she caught the scent of leather, hay, and something uniquely masculine. This man, this stranger, was now her husband in all but ceremony. The justice of the peace would take care of that formality tomorrow. The wagon lurched forward and Willa gripped the seat, unaccustomed to the rough conveyance. Isaac glanced at her white knuckles and slowed the horses slightly. "First time in a wagon?" he asked, his tone softer than before. "In Boston, we had carriages with proper springs," she admitted, then hastened to add, "but I'll adapt quickly, Mr. Lawson. I'm not afraid of hardship." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "I don't doubt it, Miss Nelson. Anyone brave enough to travel across the country to marry a stranger has courage to spare." The landscape rolled by as they traveled, so different from the crowded streets and buildings of Boston. The vast openness of the plains both terrified and exhilarated Willa. Occasionally, Isaac would point out landmarks or features a distant butte, a creek that ran year-round, the silhouette of the Spanish peaks to the west. "Your letter mentioned a ranch," Willa said after they had been traveling for some time. "How large is your property?" 800 acres, Isaac replied with quiet pride. "It's not the biggest spread in the county, but it's good land. Got about 100 head of cattle, some horses, chickens, and a few pigs. The house isn't much, just 4 rooms, but it's solid. Built it myself. And it's just you there?" Willa asked, remembering the vague details from his letter. Isaac nodded. "Just me, since my father passed 3 years ago. Had a ranch hand, Miguel, but he left to start his own place last spring. Been managing alone since then." He hesitated before adding, "That's why I placed the advertisement. A ranch needs a woman's touch, and I need—" He trailed off, suddenly self-conscious. "A helpmate," Willa supplied. "Someone to cook and clean and keep your home while you work the land." "Yes, that's part of it," Isaac agreed, but something in his tone suggested there was more left unsaid. As they crested a gentle rise, Isaac pulled the wagon to a halt. "There it is," he said, pointing to a valley below. "Lawson Ranch." Willa's heart sank at the sight. The house was indeed small, a simple wooden structure with a porch across the front. A barn stood nearby, along with a corral where several horses grazed. Chicken coops and various outbuildings dotted the property. It was well kept, but undeniably humble, a far cry from the townhouse in Boston, where she had grown up. "It's not what you're used to," Isaac said quietly, reading her expression. Willa turned to him, determined not to let disappointment show. "It's a home, Mr. Lawson. That's more than I had yesterday." Something like respect flickered in his eyes. He clicked to the horses, and they continued down toward the ranch. As they approached, Willa noticed smoke rising from the chimney. "Is someone there?" she asked, confused. Isaac had said he lived alone. "Mrs. Holloway from town," Isaac explained. "She comes out once a week to help with washing and baking. I asked her to prepare the house for your arrival." The gesture touched Willa unexpectedly. He had thought of her comfort, a courtesy she hadn't anticipated. The wagon rolled to a stop before the house, and Isaac jumped down, coming around to help Willa descend. As her feet touched the dusty yard, a plump, gray-haired woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. "Well, there you are," the woman called cheerfully. "I was beginning to think the train had run off the tracks." "Mrs. Holloway, this is Miss Wilhelmina Nelson," Isaac said formally. "Miss Nelson, Mrs. Holloway is our nearest neighbor, though near means 5 miles in these parts." The older woman beamed, enfolding Willa in a surprisingly strong embrace. "Bless you, child. We've been praying for someone to take this stubborn man in hand. Come inside, come inside. I've got supper nearly ready and the house is all prepared." Willa followed Mrs. Holloway into the house, momentarily overwhelmed by the suddenness of it all. The interior was simple but clean, with a main room that served as both kitchen and living area. A solid table with 4 chairs occupied one end, and a stone fireplace with 2 rocking chairs stood at the other. A narrow staircase led to what Willa presumed were bedrooms upstairs. "I've aired out the spare room for you, dear," Mrs. Holloway said, confirming Willa's assumption. "Isaac insisted you have your own space until after the ceremony. Very proper, our Mr. Lawson." Willa's cheeks warmed at the implication. Of course, they would share a room after the wedding. She had known this would be part of their arrangement, but the reality of it now loomed immediate and intimidating. Isaac entered, carrying her carpet bag. "I'll take this up to your room," he said, avoiding her eyes as he climbed the stairs. Mrs. Holloway bustled about, putting the finishing touches on a hearty meal of beef stew, cornbread, and fresh churned butter. I've stocked the pantry and left dough rising for tomorrow's bread, she explained. There's preserves in the cellar and eggs from this morning in the basket. Isaac's got a good garden, started out back, tomatoes coming in nicely. Willa nodded, trying to absorb all the information. Thank you, Mrs. Holloway. You've been very kind. Nonsense, child. We look after our own out here. Town's too small for strangers to stay strangers for long. When Isaac returned downstairs, they sat down to the evening meal. The conversation was stilted at first, with Mrs. Holloway doing most of the talking, sharing gossip about people Willa had yet to meet. Gradually, though, Willa found herself relaxing, even smiling at the older woman's colorful descriptions of La Junta's inhabitants. After the meal, Mrs. Holloway insisted on washing the dishes herself. My husband will be coming with the buggy soon, she explained. Isaac, why don't you show Miss Nelson around the property before it gets dark? Isaac nodded, leading Willa outside into the golden light of the setting sun. He showed her the garden, the chicken coops, the smokehouse, and the spring that provided the ranch with fresh water. As they walked, he explained his daily routines, the seasonal work of the ranch, and his plans for expansion. I'm hoping to double the herd over the next few years, he said as they stood by the corral, watching the horses. This land can support it, and the railroad means we can ship beef east for good prices. It sounds like you have a solid plan, Willa observed. My father was a merchant, but I understand business principles. A good investment yields returns over time. Isaac looked at her with new interest. Your father taught you about business. I had no brothers, Willa explained. Father believed I should understand how our household finances worked. I kept his books for the last 5 years. That's unusual, Isaac commented. As was his illness, Willa replied, a shadow crossing her face. When he could no longer write clearly, I became his hands. A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the horses graze in the fading light. One, a dappled gray mare, approached the fence, curious about the newcomer. That's Pepper, Isaac said. She's gentle enough for a beginner. I thought perhaps you might like to learn to ride. I'd like that very much, Willa said, surprising herself with her eagerness. The mare nuzzled her hand through the fence and Willa laughed softly. She's friendly. Good judge of character, Isaac said, his voice warming. For the first time, Willa caught a genuine smile on his face, transforming his features from merely handsome to striking. The sound of a horse and buggy interrupted the moment. That'll be Mr. Holloway, Isaac said, leading Willa back to the house. After the Holloways departed with promises to see them at the Justice of the Peace the following day, Isaac and Willa found themselves alone in the quiet house. An awkward silence descended, both acutely aware of their unusual circumstances. I should show you to your room, Isaac finally said. You must be tired from your journey. Upstairs, he opened a door to reveal a small but neat room. A narrow bed with a colorful quilt stood against one wall, a washstand with a pitcher and basin against another. A small chest of drawers completed the sparse furnishings. It's not much, Isaac said apologetically. It's perfectly adequate, Willa assured him. Thank you for preparing it for me. Isaac lingered in the doorway, seeming to struggle with something. Finally, he said, Miss Nelson, Wilhelmina, I want you to know that I understand this isn't what you're accustomed to. I can't offer you the comforts of Boston, but I promise you won't want for necessities here. Mr. Lawson, Willa replied carefully, I came here with my eyes open. I knew what to expect. He nodded, his expression grave. Even so, I want to be clear about my expectations. I know some men bring mail-order brides out west expecting little more than unpaid servants. That's not what I want. Willa blinked in surprise. What do you want, then? A partnership, he said simply. Someone to share this life with, not just someone to cook my meals and wash my clothes. He paused, choosing his words with care. I want a wife, Wilhelmina, not a servant. The sincerity in his voice touched something deep within Willa. I appreciate that, Mr. Lawson. Isaac, he corrected gently. If we're to be married tomorrow, you might as well use my given name. Isaac, Willa repeated, testing the name on her tongue. And you may call me Willa. Wilhelmina always seemed too formal, even in Boston. Willa, he echoed, a small smile touching his lips. It suits you better. With that, he bid her good night, leaving Willa alone with her thoughts in the small room that would be hers for just one night. Sleep eluded Willa despite her exhaustion. The unfamiliar sounds of the prairie night, the distant howl of coyotes, the chirping of crickets, the soft lowing of cattle kept her awake. The reality of her situation pressed in on her. Tomorrow, she would marry a man she had met only hours ago, binding herself to him and this remote ranch forever. Yet, as dawn's first light filtered through the simple curtains, Willa found an unexpected sense of peace settling over her. Isaac Lawson was not what she had expected, but perhaps that was for the best. He had treated her with respect and consideration from the moment they met, more than many Boston gentlemen had ever shown her. She rose and dressed in her best gown, a modest navy blue silk that had been her mother's, carefully altered to fit her smaller frame. It was outdated by Boston standards, but it was the finest thing she owned and appropriate for a wedding. However unconventional, when she descended the stairs, she found Isaac already up, dressed in clean clothes with his hair neatly combed. He stared at her as she came down, his eyes widening slightly. You look beautiful, he said, the words seeming to escape before he could think better of them. Willa felt her cheeks warm. Thank you. You look very handsome yourself. A light breakfast awaited her, fresh eggs, bacon, and biscuits. You cooked? She asked, surprised. I've been fending for myself for years, Isaac replied with a shrug. Not as good as what you'll make, I'm sure, but I haven't starved yet. They ate in companionable silence, both aware of the momentous step they were about to take. When they finished, Isaac cleared the table without being asked, another surprise that Willa filed away. The ride into La Junta was pleasant in the cool morning air. The town was larger than Willa had realized from her brief glimpse the day before, a proper street of businesses. A church, a school, and scattered houses spreading outward from the center. The Justice of the Peace, Mr. Thornton, welcomed them to his office where the Holloways waited as witnesses. The ceremony was brief, and without sentiment, a simple exchange of vows, a signing of papers, and suddenly Wilhelmina Nelson became Mrs. Isaac Lawson. Would you like to see the town before we head back to the ranch? Isaac asked as they left the justice's office, his voice uncertain as if he wasn't sure what a new bride might want. I would like that very much, Willa replied, tucking her hand into the crook of his arm in a gesture that felt both foreign and right. Isaac introduced her to the shopkeepers and townspeople they encountered. Everyone greeted her warmly, curious about the Boston lady who had come to marry their solitary rancher. Willa found herself warming to the friendly community, so different from the often cold formality of Boston society. At the general store, Isaac surprised her by purchasing several bolts of fabric. Mrs. Holloway mentioned you might want to make some curtains or clothes, he explained. Choose whatever you like. Willa selected practical cottons in cheerful colors, a luxury she hadn't expected. When Isaac added a paper of pins, needles, and several spools of thread to their purchases without being asked, she realized he had been planning this. Thank you, she said sincerely. That's very thoughtful. A ranch wife needs proper supplies, he replied with a small smile. Is there anything else you need while we're in town? Willa hesitated, not wanting to seem greedy. "Perhaps some writing paper. I promised to write to my friend Elizabeth in Boston when I arrived safely." Without hesitation, Isaac added a packet of good quality stationery and a bottle of ink to their purchases. As they were preparing to leave, the storekeeper's wife pressed a small package into Willa's hands. "A wedding gift," the woman explained. "Just some sachets for your drawers and linens. Helps keep the dust out and makes everything smell nice." Touched by the unexpected kindness, Willa thanked her profusely. Throughout the morning, other small gifts appeared: a jar of honey from the blacksmith's wife, a hand-knitted shawl from Mrs. Holloway, a cookbook of Western recipes from the minister's wife. "Everyone is so generous," Willa marveled as they finally headed back to the ranch, the wagon now containing their purchases and gifts. "They're glad to see me settled," Isaac explained, a hint of color touching his cheeks. "Been trying to get me married off for years." "Why didn't you?" Willa asked, then immediately regretted her boldness. "I apologize, that's too personal a question." Isaac was quiet for a moment but then answered, "The right person never came along. La Junta doesn't have many unmarried women, and those it does have." He shrugged. "Let's just say we didn't suit." "And now you've married a complete stranger," Willa observed softly. "Sometimes a stranger can see you more clearly than those who think they know you," Isaac replied, his words carrying a weight Willa couldn't yet understand. They reached the ranch by mid-afternoon. As Isaac helped Willa down from the wagon, he suddenly seemed nervous. "I have something to show you," he said, leading her not toward the house but around to the back. There, nestled among several young trees, stood a small garden unlike the vegetable plot he had shown her earlier. This one contained flowers, roses, daisies, and other blooms Willa didn't recognize. "My mother started this garden when they first settled here," Isaac explained. "After she died, my father let it go wild. I've been working to restore it this past year. Thought you might enjoy having flowers for the house." Willa stared at the garden, then at Isaac, moved beyond words by the gesture. This was not the action of a man who viewed a wife as merely a servant. This was a man who understood that beauty had value alongside practicality. "It's lovely," she finally managed, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for preserving it." The afternoon passed quickly as they settled into their new reality. Willa began to organize her few possessions in the main bedroom. Isaac had insisted she take it, saying he would sleep in the spare room until she was comfortable with other arrangements. The consideration behind this offer only deepened her growing respect for him. As evening approached, Willa set about preparing their first meal as a married couple. She was determined to prove her worth, to show Isaac he had not made a mistake in choosing her. The pantry Mrs. Holloway had stocked offered plenty of options, and Willa decided on a recipe her mother had taught her: a savory beef pie with a flaky crust. Isaac returned from tending the animals to find the house filled with delicious aromas. He stopped in the doorway, watching as Willa moved about the kitchen with growing confidence. "Smells wonderful," he said, startling her slightly. Willa turned, a pleased smile lighting her face. "I hope you'll enjoy it. My mother was an excellent cook and she made sure I learned her recipes." "I'm sure it will be the best meal this kitchen has seen in years," Isaac replied, washing up at the basin by the door. They ate by lamplight, the golden glow softening the simple surroundings. Isaac praised the meal sincerely, his appreciation evident in the way he savored each bite. They talked more easily now, the awkwardness of strangers beginning to fade. Willa shared stories of her childhood in Boston, and Isaac spoke of growing up on the frontier, of the challenges and rewards of ranch life. After the meal, as they sat in the rocking chairs by the fire, Isaac brought out a small package from his vest pocket. "A wedding gift," he said, handing it to Willa. "It's not much, but I wanted you to have something." Inside the simple wrapping, Willa found a delicate silver brooch in the shape of a rose. "It was my mother's," Isaac explained. "One of the few pretty things she brought west with her." "Isaac, I can't accept this," Willa protested. "It's a family heirloom, your family now," he said simply. "Who else should have it?" Tears pricked Willa's eyes as she pinned the brooch to her dress. "Thank you. I'll treasure it always." As the fire burned low, the question of sleeping arrangements loomed unspoken between them. Finally, Isaac rose. "It's been a long day. I'll leave you to rest." He hesitated, then added, "Good night, Mrs. Lawson." The name sent a shiver through Willa. Mrs. Lawson. She was truly married now, bound to this man and this place. "Good night, Mr. Lawson," she replied softly, watching as he climbed the stairs to the spare room, leaving her alone with her thoughts. The days that followed fell into a rhythm as Willa adjusted to her new life. Each morning, she rose early to prepare breakfast before Isaac headed out to work the ranch. The days were filled with household tasks: baking bread, churning butter, tending the garden, preserving food for the coming winter. In the evenings, they would share the day's events over supper, their conversations growing more comfortable with each passing day. True to his word, Isaac treated Willa with unfailing respect. He never demanded or expected her service, instead expressing gratitude for each meal, each clean shirt, each small improvement she made to their home. He brought her wildflowers from the range, helped carry water from the spring, and built shelves in the kitchen when she mentioned needing more storage. A week after their wedding, Isaac brought Pepper, the dappled mare, to the house after breakfast. "I thought today might be a good day for your first riding lesson," he suggested. "If you're interested." Willa's face lit up. "I'd love that." Isaac had prepared a side saddle, conscious of Willa's Eastern sensibilities. "Most women out here ride astride," he explained, "but I thought you might be more comfortable starting this way." "How thoughtful," Willa said, genuinely touched by his consideration. The lesson began with Isaac showing her how to approach the horse, how to speak to it gently, how to mount and dismount safely. Willa was an eager student, listening carefully to his instructions and trying her best to follow them. When she finally sat properly in the saddle, hands correctly positioned on the reins, Isaac's approval was evident in his smile. "You're a natural," he encouraged as she guided Pepper in a small circle around the yard. "Hardly," Willa laughed, "but I'm determined to learn." "A ranch wife should be able to ride, shouldn't she?" "A ranch wife can do whatever she sets her mind to," Isaac replied, a note of pride in his voice that warmed Willa from within. The lesson ended when Willa's muscles, unaccustomed to the new activity, began to protest. As Isaac helped her down from the saddle, his hands firm around her waist, their eyes met. For a moment they stood close, the air between them charged with something unspoken. Then Isaac stepped back, clearing his throat. "You did well today," he said, his voice slightly rough. "We'll try again tomorrow if you're not too sore." "I'd like that," Willa replied, suddenly shy. That evening, Willa worked up her courage to ask Isaac about his plans for the ranch. "You mentioned wanting to expand the herd," she said as they sat by the fire. "How will you manage that alone?" "You said your ranch hand left last spring." Isaac looked up from the bridle he was repairing. "I've been thinking about that. There's a family, the Riveras, who have worked ranches in the area for years. Miguel, their eldest son, is looking for steady work. I'm considering hiring him." "That sounds sensible," Willa agreed. "One man can't do everything, no matter how capable." "Does that mean you approve of the expense?" Isaac asked, a hint of teasing in his voice. Willa blushed, realizing how presumptuous she must sound. I didn't mean to imply, no, Isaac interrupted gently. I'm asking sincerely. This is your home too, Willa. Your opinion matters. The simple statement left Willa momentarily speechless. In her father's house, despite keeping his books, she had never been consulted on financial decisions. That Isaac would seek her input struck her as remarkable. Yes, she said finally, I think it's a wise investment. The ranch needs to grow to prosper, and you need help to make that happen. Isaac nodded, satisfied. I'll speak to Miguel next time we're in town. True to his word, Isaac hired Miguel Rivera the following week. The young man proved to be hardworking and knowledgeable, his presence allowing Isaac to focus on improvements to the ranch he had been postponing. With Miguel's help, Isaac began building a new section of barn to accommodate the expanded herd he planned to purchase. Willa, meanwhile, continued to transform the house into a home. With the fabric Isaac had bought her, she made new curtains for the windows, cushions for the rocking chairs, and even a cheerful tablecloth. She planted herbs near the kitchen door for cooking, expanded the flower garden, and meticulously organized the pantry and cellar for maximum efficiency. The spare room, once Isaac's temporary sleeping quarters, was gradually being converted into a proper sitting room. Isaac had moved back into the main bedroom after their first 2 weeks of marriage, though he had been scrupulously respectful of Willa's privacy, sleeping on his side of the bed without presumption. One evening in late August, as summer's heat began to wane, Willa sat on the porch watching a spectacular sunset paint the western sky in shades of orange, pink, and purple. Isaac joined her, settling into the chair beside hers, his day's work complete. Beautiful, isn't it? He commented, following her gaze to the horizon. I never saw sunsets like this in Boston, Willa replied. The buildings were always in the way. Do you miss it? Isaac asked, his tone careful. The city, I mean. Willa considered the question honestly. I miss certain things, bookshops, concerts, my friend Elizabeth. But no, I don't miss Boston itself. She turned to look at him, her expression sincere. I'm happy here, Isaac, happier than I expected to be. Something shifted in Isaac's eyes, a softening that made Willa's heart beat faster. I'm glad, he said simply, reaching over to take her hand in his. They sat in companionable silence as the sun disappeared and stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Isaac's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of Willa's hand, a simple touch that sent warmth flowing through her. When I sent for a bride, Isaac said suddenly, his voice low, I never expected someone like you. What did you expect? Willa asked, curious. Someone more practical, I suppose, hardened by life, ready to tackle the difficulties of ranch living. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Instead, I got you educated, refined, and yet stronger than any woman I've ever known. I'm not strong, Willa protested softly. Aren't you? Isaac turned to face her fully now. You left everything familiar behind to travel across the country to marry a stranger. You've adapted to a completely different way of life without a single complaint. If that's not strength, I don't know what is. Willa ducked her head, unused to such praise. I had no choice. After Father died, there are always choices, Isaac interrupted gently. You could have become a companion to some wealthy widow or taken a position as a governess. Instead, you chose the unknown. That took courage, Willa. Their eyes met in the gathering darkness, and Willa saw something in Isaac's gaze that made her breath catch admiration. Yes, but also something deeper, something that looked remarkably like affection. Later that night, as they prepared for bed in the room they now shared, Willa felt a new awareness between them. Isaac moved around the room with the same consideration he always showed, but there was a tension in the air, an unspoken question hovering between them. As Willa plaited her hair for sleep, she caught Isaac watching her in the small mirror, his expression unguarded for once. When their eyes met in the reflection, he didn't look away. "What is it?" she asked softly. Isaac approached slowly, coming to stand behind her. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to her hair. Puzzled but curious, Willa nodded. With careful fingers, Isaac undid her work, combing through the chestnut waves until her hair fell loose around her shoulders. The intimacy of the gesture made Willa's heart pound. "My mother always wore her hair down at night," Isaac explained, his voice husky. "My father used to say it was like watching the sun set to see her take the pins out each evening." Willa turned to face him, acutely aware of their proximity. "Isaac," she whispered, uncertain what she wanted to say but needing to say something. He touched her cheek gently, his calloused fingertips surprisingly soft against her skin. "I never thought I could feel this way about someone I've known so briefly," he admitted. "But these weeks with you, Willa, they've changed everything." "For me too," she confessed, her voice barely audible when Isaac lowered his head to kiss her. It felt like the most natural thing in the world. His lips were warm and tender against hers, the kiss conveying what words had failed to express, that what had begun as an arrangement of convenience had become something far more meaningful. That night marked a turning point in their marriage. The formal politeness that had characterized their interactions gave way to a deeper connection, a genuine partnership built on growing affection and mutual respect. As summer turned to autumn, life on the ranch intensified with harvest and preparations for winter. Isaac and Miguel brought in the hay, slaughtered a pig for smoking, and repaired buildings against the coming cold. Willa canned vegetables from the garden, dried herbs, and put up preserves, determined that her first winter as a ranch wife would find them well prepared. In October, Isaac took Willa to the harvest dance in La Junta. She wore her navy silk dress, now updated with lace from the general store and the silver rose brooch pinned at her throat. Isaac, dressed in his Sunday best, couldn't take his eyes off her as they entered the town hall. "Mrs. Lawson, you are without doubt the most beautiful woman in Colorado Territory," he said, offering his arm with a flourish that made her laugh. The evening was filled with music, dancing, and the warm camaraderie of neighbors. Isaac proved to be a surprisingly good dancer, guiding Willa confidently through waltzes and reels. When he held her close during a particularly slow tune, his breath warm against her hair, Willa realized with sudden clarity that she had fallen in love with her husband. The revelation should have shocked her, but somehow it felt right, as if her heart had known all along what her mind was only now acknowledging. This man, this kind, honorable, hard-working man who had never once treated her as less than his equal, had claimed her heart completely. As they rode home under a canopy of stars, Willa rested her head against Isaac's shoulder, content in a way she had never expected to be. When he wrapped an arm around her, pulling her closer against the night's chill, she felt truly at home. "I've been thinking," Isaac said as the lights of the ranch came into view, "about adding on to the house before winter sets in. The sitting room is coming along nicely, but I thought perhaps we might need another bedroom. Eventually." The implication of his words hung in the air between them. "Another bedroom for children. Their children." "I think that's a wonderful idea," Willa replied softly, her heart full of a new kind of happiness. The weeks that followed were busy with the bedroom addition. Isaac and Miguel worked tirelessly, and even Mrs. Holloway's husband came to help on occasion. Willa contributed by cooking hearty meals for the workers and offering suggestions on the room's layout. By early November, as the first snows threatened, the new room was enclosed and nearly finished. Isaac had ordered a proper bed frame from a craftsman in town, and Willa had pieced together a colorful quilt to brighten the space. "It's a fine room," Mrs. Holloway declared during one of her visits. "Perfect for a nursery when the time comes." Her knowing smile made Willa blush to the roots of her hair. The first real snow came just after Thanksgiving, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. Willa stood at the window, watching the flakes swirl and dance in the morning light, when she felt Isaac's arms encircle her from behind. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he murmured against her ear. "Yes," she agreed, leaning back into his embrace. "Though I imagine it makes ranch work more difficult." "It does," Isaac acknowledged, "but it has its compensations. The cattle need less tending when they're close to the barn, and the snow means more time inside." His arms tightened slightly. "More time with you." Willa turned in his embrace, reaching up to touch his face. "I like the sound of that." That winter proved to be one of discovery for them both. The forced confinement of snowy days and long evenings gave them time to truly know one another. Isaac taught Willa to play chess on a board that had been his grandfather's. In return, she read to him from the few books she had brought from Boston: Shakespeare, Dickens, and her personal favorite, Jane Austen. They shared stories of their childhoods, their hopes and disappointments, their dreams for the future. Isaac spoke of his desire to establish a breeding program for horses, while Willa confessed her secret wish to someday open a small school for the ranchers' children who lived too far from town. "You'd make a wonderful teacher," Isaac encouraged. "Perhaps when spring comes, we could see about converting the old storage shed into a schoolroom. It would need windows and proper benches, of course." His immediate support of her dream, his assumption that her aspirations mattered as much as his own, only deepened Willa's love for him. Christmas brought its own magic to the ranch. Isaac cut a small pine from their land, and Willa decorated it with paper stars and strings of dried berries. They exchanged modest gifts: a hand-knitted scarf from Willa, a journal with a leather cover from Isaac. The Holloways joined them for Christmas dinner, bringing news from town and gifts of candy and preserves. As the new year of 1876 began, Willa found herself facing mornings with unexpected queasiness. At first, she dismissed it as a winter ailment, but as the pattern continued, a different explanation suggested itself. When she missed her monthly courses for the second time, she could no longer deny the evidence. One evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Willa gathered her courage. "Isaac," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I have something to tell you." He looked up from his newspaper, his expression immediately concerned. "Is something wrong?" "No," Willa assured him quickly. "At least, I hope you won't think so." She took a deep breath. "I believe I'm going to have a baby. In summer, probably July." Isaac's face transformed, wonder replacing concern as her words registered. "A baby," he echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're going to have a baby," Willa nodded, suddenly anxious. "Are you pleased?" In answer, Isaac crossed to her chair and dropped to his knees before her, taking her hands in his. "Pleased, Willa, I don't even have words for what I'm feeling." His eyes shone with emotion as he pressed a kiss to her palms. "Thank you. Thank you for coming here, for becoming my wife, for giving me this gift." Tears filled Willa's eyes at the depth of feeling in his voice. "I should be thanking you," she said softly. "When I came here, I expected to be little more than a servant. Instead, you've treated me as a partner, as a lady deserving of respect. You've given me a home, a purpose, and love I never expected to find." "I love you, Willa Lawson," Isaac declared, the words simple but profound. "I think I started falling in love with you that first day at the train station, when you stood so brave and determined despite your uncertainty." "And I love you," Willa replied, the declaration feeling both monumental and entirely natural. Not because you saved me from destitution, but because of the man you are kind, honorable, and far wiser than you give yourself credit for. Their kiss sealed the declaration, a promise of the life they would continue to build together. Spring brought new life to the ranch in more ways than one. The cattle delivered healthy calves, the garden sprouted with fresh vigor, and Willa's body changed as their child grew within her. Isaac insisted she reduce her workload, hiring Mrs. Holloway's niece to come 3 times a week to help with the heavier chores. True to his word, Isaac began converting the old storage shed into a schoolroom. With Miguel's help, he added windows and a proper door, built sturdy benches and a teacher's desk, and even constructed a small blackboard. The project gave Willa immense pleasure as she watched her casual dream take physical form through her husband's efforts. By May, word had spread about Mrs. Lawson's school, and 5 families from outlying ranches had expressed interest in sending their children when harvest season ended. The prospect filled Willa with nervous excitement. "You really think I can do this?" she asked Isaac one evening as they inspected the nearly completed schoolroom. "I have no doubt," he replied confidently. "You have the knowledge, the patience, and the heart for teaching. These children will be fortunate to learn from you." His faith in her abilities bolstered Willa's confidence, as it had so many times since her arrival in Colorado. The summer of 1876 brought celebration to the nation with the centennial, though such festivities were distant from the quiet routine of the ranch. For Willa and Isaac, the real celebration came on a sweltering July evening when, after hours of labor attended by Mrs. Holloway and the local midwife, their son entered the world with a lusty cry. "He has your eyes," Willa whispered as Isaac held their child for the first time. Awe and terror mingled on his face. "And your nose, thank goodness," Isaac replied, his voice choked with emotion. "What shall we call him?" They had discussed names but had reached no firm decision. Now, looking at the tiny face of their son, Willa knew. "William, after my father. William Isaac Lawson." "It's a good name," Isaac agreed, gently touching the baby's cheek. "A strong name for a boy who will grow up on the frontier." "Not just the frontier," Willa corrected softly. "A home, our home." As summer faded into autumn, life on the Lawson ranch settled into a new rhythm. Baby William thrived, growing stronger each day. The cattle were fat and healthy, promising a good return when taken to market. The schoolroom welcomed its first students in September, 8 children, ranging in age from 6 to 14, eager for the education Willa could provide. On a crisp October evening, 5 years to the day from when Willa had first arrived in La Junta, she stood on the porch watching the sunset, William sleeping soundly in the cradle inside. The ranch had prospered beyond their early hopes. The herd had indeed doubled. The house had been expanded again to include a proper dining room, and a second child was now growing beneath Willa's heart, though she had yet to share the news with Isaac. She heard his footsteps behind her, familiar and welcome. His arms came around her, and she leaned back against his chest, content in the circle of his embrace. "Penny for your thoughts," Isaac murmured, resting his chin on the top of her head. "I was thinking about the day I arrived," Willa admitted. "How terrified I was, how certain that I had made a dreadful mistake." Isaac chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her back. "I was terrified too. Afraid you'd take one look at this place and demand passage back to Boston on the next train. Instead, I found a home," Willa said, turning to face him. "And a man who treated me not as the servant I expected to be, but as the lady I never truly believed I was." "You've always been a lady, Willa Lawson," Isaac replied, his eyes warm with the love that had grown between them over the years. I just had the good sense to recognize it. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Willa shared her secret that their family would grow again in the spring. Isaac's joy was as profound as it had been with their first child, his gratitude and love evident in every touch, every word. Later, as they lay together in the darkness of their bedroom, Willa reflected on the journey that had brought her to this place, this man, this life. What had begun as an act of desperation had become a love story she could never have imagined in her Boston drawing room. "No regrets," Isaac whispered, as if reading her thoughts. "Not one," Willa replied with absolute certainty, curling closer to the man who had given her not just a home, but a life filled with purpose, respect, and love beyond measure. "This is exactly where I was always meant to be."